So, welcome to the Animal Resistance University. Today, we'll be having a talk from Dipesh about activism and animal rights in Nepal, which will be really interesting. Now, I'm going to give the word to Dipesh, who's going to give this wonderful presentation about how it is in Nepal.
Let me share my screen. So hi everyone, my name is Dipesh and I'm from Nepal. My title is Framing the AR Movement in Nepal, but basically it's framing the AR movement in any place where the vegan movement is just in the beginning phase. And the motive of this presentation is to give a guidance for the new activists, new generation activists, about how to take the activism forward. Let me start with how the AR movement has been in Nepal till now. So in Nepal, the main issue here is the religious sacrifice along with the meat consumption. And to stop that, there's already a vegetarian movement that exists here. But the problem is that it consists of a group of elder generation. So new generations are not that included in those movements. And what I have noticed in this movement is that the outreach has very low impact, and there's no measurable way of telling how many people actually change their diet or change their way of thinking because of this kind of activism. The concept of veganism here in Nepal is still not clear. Even the concept of vegetarian is taken very lightly here, and people do not respect when someone says that they're vegetarian. And now when we try to make them understand what veganism is, it's very difficult for them to grasp the idea of it. Let me tell you a little story which I experienced when I was little. I remember when I was little, I went to a temple with my family and we had to stay on a line. It was a pretty long line. We were waiting to buy tickets for a cable car ride, and a family in front of us had taken a goat for religious sacrifice, and the goat was crying loudly, and most of the people standing in the line were irritated by that, and even my mom, why is this stupid goat crying so loudly? And as a child, my response was, the goat is going to be sacrificed in few hours, like shouldn't he have the right to cry for a little bit? And my mom looked at me with anger. In that moment I realized that I had a disconnect somewhere. The thing that I just said and going home and eating meat, that wasn't something that I believed in. And it took me some years to figure out what the disconnect was, and then I turned vegan. After that, my vegan activism journey also soon started, because being vegan was very easy. Finding nutritious food was also very easy, but the difficult part was being alone with my thoughts. Even though I already turned vegan and was not supporting the violence towards the animals, the thought that those animals are still in those cages, still being tortured and still being murdered, that thought haunt me for months, and I couldn't just stay there. So I decided on my own to start going to schools and educate other students about what's happening in the slaughterhouse. And that's how the vegan activism started for me. And at the time, there weren't many vegans in Nepal. But later I found many people who believed the same thing as I believed, and then we started a small group. We formed a loose group and started doing few activism. And at the time, all we had that we could look up and learn from were all those vegetarian activists before us and all those activists from other countries who have put their work in internet. So from there we learned few things about animal rights movement, and few of them are animals are the most exploited group than any other group. And if we all turn vegan, almost all the problems will go away. We also learned that activists say that non-vegan environmentalists are hypocrites, and we need to focus all our time on animal movement, because we need to give our every second, every minute for the animals. Going to protest and speaking up will help animals. These points were something that we all truly believed. And now, when thinking about it, I wouldn't say that all of these things were wrong, but I won't again say that all of those things were correct as well. Substantial amount of people believe that animal rights movement in its course would be against exploitation and injustice and oppression. And I believe that everybody in the animal rights movement should think the animal rights movement in such a way. And if our movement is against injustice, exploitation, and oppression, then it should be larger than focusing on only one injustice. Now, if we say that environmentalists are hypocrites for talking about the environment yet not being vegan themselves, what can we say about ourselves when we call ourselves a group of activists fighting against injustice and exploitation and oppression while supporting another form of exploitation and oppression? This is a very important quote for every activist, and every movement. It is important because we should all be speaking up for each other. Because if we do not speak up for each other, then we would just be distributed in smaller pieces, and the justice which should be served, which should be provided, would be late and would be ineffective. According to dictionary, activists are someone who campaigns to bring political or social change. And we have to realize that society does not have only one single issue or one single movement. A society is considered of different problems, different injustice. So recently in Nepal, there was this case of a guy and four of his friends were beaten up and murdered because they were so-called lower class. He dared to love a girl who was in a higher class, and this issue got lot of attention here in Nepal. Now it is a movement that's very important in our society, because untouchability and casteism is still exist here. And it was along the same time while the George Floyd movement was beginning. So there were lots of issues happening at the same time, and bringing up animal rights issue at the same time, it would be disregarding the fact that other movements are as important as animal rights movement. What we should do about that is that every activist in every movement think that their activism is important. For example, an environmentalist will think that their movement is much important than other movement. A feminist will think that their movement is much important than other movement. And in same way, animal rights activists will think that their movement is important than other movement. Now, our goal should not be to show that our movement is bigger and important than other movement, but our goal should be to bring all the movement together. So right now, if we look at the news, then there are few movements that catches most of the headlines. Right now, in the larger sense, feminist movement, Black Lives Movement, and climate crisis movement are catching more headlines. And inside Nepal, there's Nirmala rape and murder case movement and protests against government's incompetence during COVID-19 movement. There's a protest against high book tax. There's protest against Nisgar International Airport. There's lots of issue. And there's protest against the casteism. Protest for Dalit Lives Movement. And these movement, all movements are important in their own way. They have their own injustice. They have their own victim. And they have to be, our voices have to be raised to bring justice to those people and those issues. Now, what can we do to understand others' movement? What can we do to be more inclusive in others' movement? So I have thought about 4 steps that we can take to understand others' movement. So first one is understanding what the movement is about, understanding what they stand for, and understanding what they stand against. The second one is making a conscious decision. Third one is boycotting our involvement, and the fourth one is getting active. So for example, even looking at the environmental issue or single-use plastic issue. So if you go to a supermarket and they hand you a single-use plastic, and even if you decide to take the plastic home, then you are making a conscious decision about how your action is going to affect the environment. And now you can think about the effect, and now you can make a decision whether to throw away the plastic or make a use out of it. Boycotting our involvement would be understanding what effects we have on our decision and then not supporting that have the negative impacts. And getting active means talking about it, getting into the streets, helping make change. So we can be on any of those steps in the beginning phases, but the most important thing is to keep moving forward until we get active. What I want from this group, everyone who is listening, is to give a guidance for the new generation. We have already been exposed to the activism. We have already seen the conflicts between even inside the animal rights movement. So it is our responsibility to guide the newer generation on what the activism should be about and how it should be taken forward. One would be that single focus change will not work and it is just egoistic. Thinking that your own activism is more important and more better and should be given more focus than other activism, that is just egoistic. And number two is understanding and learning about how different form of activism works. That opens new possible solutions for our own movement. Understanding how feminists bring change in the society, how feminist movement bring change in law, how gay rights movement bring changes in our society. Understanding this different movement will help us come up with a creative way of even putting forward a creative solution for how to change laws and how to change the mindset of people in the animal rights movement. At the end, I would like to say that until we stand up together against oppression and injustice, the future we vision will stay far. Helping each other is how we will bring effective change. Thank you.